So we're going to go a little bit into what is called the Gita Dhyanam, which is a prayer in praise of the Bhagavad Gita. And then we're going to go through chapter 1 of the Bhagavad Gita and go partway into chapter 2 today. That's my plan. Before we do those things, we'll do a prayer, and then I'll answer some of the questions that came in from last week's class. Okay. Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Saha Viryam Karavavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu, Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay. So, questions from last week that were emailed into me are really about the story that I was telling, so it's better to go through those now. Let's see, what's the best order to take these? Okay, so 2 of the questions are about the sun and moon lineages that I began with last week. And so the first one is the story of the sun people in the Mahabharata as well, or in another text? So these stories about the planets are part of what's called the Puranas, or the Puranic stories in this tradition. And so you can find those stories in a number of places. Purana is Purana, if you're spelling it in English letters, Purana. And those are all of these sometimes very fantasy, unusual stories with characters that are planets and stars and animals and sages and gods and goddesses. All of those stories are part of the Puranas. So the story about the sun and the moon and all the planets and their various affairs and doings are Puranic stories, and they're found in various places. One text you could look into is the Devi Bhagavatam. Devi, D-E-V-I, Bhagavatam, B-H-A-G-A-V-A-T-A-M, Bhagavatam. Devi Bhagavatam is full of Puranic stories, and there's many other texts of Puranas, but that's one to begin with. Most translations of the Mahabharata that you get are not actually going to start with that moon story that I told, but the characters that are in the Mahabharata are part of that moon lineage. So I just thought it was a fun and interesting place to start, because we get some insight as to the constitution of that lineage being highly emotional and highly passionate and subject to changing their minds and things like that. The sun people, the text that highlights the sun people I mentioned, I think last week, is the Ramayana, the other well-known epic story of the Hindu tradition, Ramayana, the story of Rama and Sita, and it includes the story of Hanuman. That is those characters are part of the lineage of the sun. And again, the story is about the planets, or the characters and beings as planets, and the gods and goddesses are part of the Puranas, not really in these epics. Okay, so hopefully that answers that question. The next one that was about the moon lineage. Okay, I see. It's not so much about the moon, but I'm not sure whether you all will be able to remember the story, but this will at least answer the question for this person. So how can the Pandavas be part of the moon lineage, or part of this same lineage of kings, if they're this? I'm going to read the question and I'll catch you up on the characters that are being referenced. If they are the sons of Satyavati's firstborn from a Swami who isn't even part of that lineage, or is he? So let's see if I can jump way. I did put this in here somewhere. You can see way ahead where we're headed today. Let's see. Okay, so for those who are interested in the story, here's what happens to remind us, so that Satyavati was married to King Shantanu. Satyavati was the daughter of the fisherman who was extremely ambitious and insisted that his daughter could only marry the king if her sons would also become kings, or if her children would be royals and be able to have the opportunity to be seated on the throne. That's why Bhishma took his vow of celibacy and vow to protect the throne but never sit on the throne, and vow not to have children, so that it would be guaranteed that Satyavati's children would have an opportunity at the throne. When her son with King Shantanu dies before having children, his widows then have children by her son from a previous encounter, and that is Sage Vyasa. So the rules at this time are maybe different than what we would think of at this time in terms of who belongs to whom in a lineage. Because Satyavati was married to a king, then any of her children become part of that lineage. And because, let's see, Vichitra Virya, the one who died, his wives, their children become part of that lineage, even if those children are not Vichitra Viryas. Okay, so any child, to put it simply, any child that the widows have will be heirs, potential heirs to the throne. It's actually maybe a little bit less of a sexist setup than what we would think of today. Okay, so hopefully that answers the question. It doesn't matter as long as they were married. Ambika and Ambalika were once married to Vichitra Virya before he passed. Their children have a right to the throne, and that's why Pandu's children then have a right to the throne. Hopefully that makes sense. It's a very complicated story with too many characters to keep track of. Okay. The next simpler question to answer is, how can Arjuna have any relationship? Okay, this person said, this is jumping ahead into the story. How can Arjuna have relationship with the people he's about to fight with if he grew up in the forest? So I did realize I omitted a part of this story, many parts, but one that's key. We'll see when we get to the battlefield in chapter 1 that, and most of you know this, Arjuna drops to his knees in dismay when he realizes that his loved ones are on the other side of the battlefield that he's about to fight. And so the question is, like, how can his cousins, for example, why would he even have remorse or even any relationship with them if he grew up in the forest and they grew up in the kingdom? When the Pandavas, when the father Pandu dies and the Pandavas come back to the kingdom, they're still fairly young. They had been growing up in the forest to a certain point, immersed in nature, close to nature, as I described last week. But then when they return to the kingdom, they're still young enough that they do come up with their cousins. They're learning together with the same teachers. They're learning the same teachings together. They're living amongst one another. And so they are in relationship. And I'll talk a little bit more about Arjuna's perspective and feelings towards his cousins in a little bit, and how it's different than his cousins feel towards him and why that is. And then finally, has Vishnu ever come to earth on another occasion to protect Dharma other than in the Gita? So yes, there are a number of avatars, descended stars that are considered to be, we could say, incarnations of Vishnu, or Vishnu coming to earth for the purpose of protecting Dharma. And so Krishna is just one of them, one example. And in some cases, people will think of the Buddha as an incarnation of Vishnu. Lord Rama from the Ramayana is an incarnation of Vishnu. Narasimha, some of you will know, that's the man that's part lion, is an incarnation of Vishnu, and so on. You might even find people that say that Jesus is an incarnation of Vishnu. So from the Hindu perspective, sometimes what you see is that it's much more inclusive. It's sort of the idea is like, we'll take all the help we can get. Sure, that's one of our guys. That's one of our guys. So you'll see, in those of you who've been to India may have seen there'll be posters with Rama and Krishna and Shiva and Jesus and Buddha and all of the different saints and sages and what would be considered maybe avatars of all times all together. But yes, there have been other what are considered specific avatars of Vishnu. And it is always a form of Vishnu that comes because Vishnu is the sustaining factor of manifestation. So when things are threatening to go off kilter on earth, it is the quality of, or the capacity of upholding Dharma that needs to be upheld. And that's what the Vishnu principle is in this story, coming in the form of Krishna. The principle